Hello and welcome back. This is the week 4 lecture. So, this week is all about research topics. It is time to select our topics that we will be working with for the rest of the semester. So, I just want to be very clear about the way the rest of the class is going to unfold. I talked about this a little bit back in week 1, and I tried to make it clear on the syllabus, but let me just emphasize it here right now. So the topics that we select this week are going to be the topics that we eventually write about on our research papers. And everything that we do between now and the big research paper at the end of the semester, everything's going to be about this topic. Everything's going to be geared towards getting you ready to eventually write the big research paper, which is obviously the centerpiece of this entire class. So once we get moving on research next week, we're going to start working on our annotated bibliographies, and all of the sources that we find for those are going to be about the topic that you choose here in week 4. And everything else we do, the summary, the rhetorical analysis, the proposal, all of that stuff will require you to work with this same topic. And then after we're finished with all of those preliminary assignments, we will turn our attention to the big research paper, and you're still working with the same topic. So by the time we're starting on the research paper, you're going to know a lot about your topic. You're going to become somewhat of an expert. You're going to spend a lot of time researching, reading about it, learning about it, writing about it, obviously, in a lot of different ways, and then you're going to be ready to tackle our big research paper. So I want to emphasize that because when you guys are choosing topics this week, you need to make sure that you're picking a topic that you like, a topic that you're interested in, a topic that you actually care about. Now, I have posted a list of sample topics. I actually included that in the week 3 module last week, and it's also here in the week 4 module this week. So feel free to look through those. You can choose any one of those. If you're having trouble coming up with your own original topic, if you're just feeling stuck, you can use my list and you can choose any topic that you find there. But you don't have to. I want to be clear. It's not required that you choose any of those sample topics on my list. That's just there. The list is just there to help those of us who need the help. And you'll notice if you look through that list that all of those topics are pretty much like hot button current events, things that are being debated, things that are being talked about or reported on right now. Some of them are sort of global or at least national stories or issues that people are talking about. And in some cases, they're a little bit more local to Nevada in particular. So we can kind of stick to our own local communities or our own state, our own region, or we can think more nationally about the U.S. as a whole. And of course, we can also think globally. We can think about problems or issues that might affect the world. Of course, we have to get specific at some point. We can't cover the world, but we can pick issues or current problems or just things that people are talking about, and we can sort of pick them at any one of those levels. So the list might help you, but I really encourage you guys to come up with your own topics, and they can be sort of based on what you see on the list. But I want you guys to really pick stuff that you have a personal investment in, stuff that matters to you, topics that might even directly affect you, or they might affect your workplace or your family or people you know. They might be connected to what you're studying here in school. They might be connected to your future job, your future career field. They might be based on something in your own life. All of that's good because it gives you a personal stake in the topic. And it guarantees that you care about the topic matters, you're interested in the topic, and trust me, if you're interested and you care, that will make all of our future work easier. It's always easier to read about and write about topics that we're actually interested in rather than things that we just picked at random or things that were given to us because oftentimes we just don't care as much about those kinds of topics. So use my list, sure, and you can always pick those hot button kind of issues that are in the news, being talked about. Those always make for pretty good topics because remember, when we're working on our research papers, we have to make original arguments about these topics. We're not ready to do that yet, and we're not going to be ready to do that for quite some time, but that is our ultimate goal. So that's why current issues or like big problems facing our society, those are always good things to choose as topics because it's relatively easy to make arguments about them. You can be for something, against something. You can be offering, solutions, ways to fix a big problem. You might be identifying a big problem that we need to be doing something about, but maybe we're not yet. So those kinds of hot button current events or issues, they always give you a lot of room to make arguments. But we don't have to get too hung up on the argument side yet, because typically if you pick a good topic, eventually, even if it's something that's a lot closer to you, more local, more based on your own life, that's fine, because eventually we can probably find an argument to make about that topic. You don't have to know what your argument's going to be this week. You don't have to know what your argument's going to be next week when we get moving on research. And in fact, the research is going to help you to sort of arrive at your own original position, your own original argument. All we need this week is a topic, and we're going to run through some exercises here today to kind of help us get started on choosing our topics. And then I'm going to give you guys just a few tips, some easy ways to kind of get started on our research. Now, next week is the official start of our research. I'm going to be showing you guys how to use the library databases through the library homepage here at GBC. So that's next week. We're going to get moving on all of that. But in the meantime, you can just use Google and a few other simple strategies to start learning more about your topics. But before you can do that, that's for later in the week. Before you can do that, you first must have a topic in mind, written down, and we need to get some notes. We need to do a little bit of brainstorming, and I'm going to help you with that here in a moment. So let's start by thinking a little bit about ourselves, okay? This is usually not hard for most of us. A lot of times with big academic, argumentative papers, we think that we can only write about academic stuff. It has to be science related, or it has to be something that the professor cares about. It has to be one of these current events that's all over the news. A lot of students look at it that way, and they say, but I don't really care about that stuff. I don't feel personally connected to any of that stuff, but I guess if the professor wants me to write about whatever, the war over here, global warming, some big topic, I guess I'll just pick that because that's the kind of thing that we write about for research papers. And yeah, again, those kinds of topics about, wars, education, global warming, big debates that are going on, those always make for good topics. But if you don't care about those things, if none of those things really interest you, if you don't feel personally connected to those things, then you're better off picking something different to write about. So let's start with our personal interests, and let's start with our pre-existing knowledge. Let's think about knowledge. What knowledge do we already possess? So that's where I want you to start with our brainstorming session. Let's just get some notes down on paper. You know, you can be doing this by hand, you can be typing this up in a Word doc, but let's just get moving with what we already know. What are we already knowledgeable about? What are we already interested in? Let's just start writing some things down. And I want you to think about this kind of on 3 levels. So obviously we're in school, so let's think about school. What is your major? Maybe you don't have one picked yet, but if you do, think about it. If you don't, just think about what you might like to study. What field are you interested in? What area of academic study do you see yourself pursuing over the course of your college career? We can start there. What are you knowledgeable about in terms of school? What are you focusing on in school? So you can write a few things down for that. But then we can leave school. We can step outside of school. And you can think about the workplace. A lot of us have jobs. A lot of us have a lot of pre-existing workplace experience. So think about jobs that you've had. Think about the job that you currently have. What is some knowledge that you've acquired in those different sort of workplace settings? Doesn't matter what the job is, right? If you're working at a pizza place, if you're a car mechanic, if you're working for the mines, if your only real experience is like bussing tables or bagging groceries, it doesn't matter. Those are all jobs, and all jobs have certain skills that go along with them. So if you've done any of those jobs, you've learned the skills that are necessary and required for those jobs. So you have collected sort of a body of knowledge. Even if you don't really feel like you have, you actually have. So let's think about the knowledge that we've gained from our various workplace experiences. And then the third level is hobbies, personal interests and hobbies. What do we like to do in our free time? Are we gamers? Are we hunters or fisher people? Do we hunt? Do we fish? Do we play sports? Do we play musical instruments? What are the skills or the knowledge that we possess outside of school and outside of maybe the workplace? Just things that we enjoy, things that we do for fun. Things that we pursue on the weekends or during our free time. Because typically, if we really are into a particular hobby, no matter what it is, we're going to know a lot about that hobby. So that's also knowledge that you can use. So just jot down some stuff. And the next step is to take some of that pre-existing knowledge, whether it be related to school, work, or just hobbies, and we can start connecting them to topics that feel a little bit more academic. Okay, so I've seen this play out many times in past semesters. I've had students who will put down, I have experience working with kids. I used to work at a daycare, or I have kids of my own, so I have experience working with little kids. I know a little bit about babysitting and just dealing with young children. Okay, so that's what they write down during the brainstorming session. And then they're able to start thinking, okay, well, how can I turn that into an argumentative or an academic topic that I can later make an argument about? Well, that can start to get us connected to maybe early childhood development or behavioral science. Right? If you're interested in little kids, if you already have some knowledge about working with little kids, now that might get you on an early education track. Maybe that's what you're going to school for. Maybe that's the career you want to eventually have. So maybe that's a good place to get that. Maybe that's a good topic to pursue. Right, so connect your interest or what you already know about to something that might feel and sound a little bit more academic, like early childhood development or behavioral science. So that's one way to start making these connections. But it doesn't even have to be something like working with kids. I've had many students who like to hunt or fish. They're sportsmen or sportswomen. They like to do those kinds of things. Those are hobbies. Okay, great. So if you have a strong interest in hunting, all right, and you know a lot about hunting, you have personal experience, you've done it, your friends and family do it, you've read about it, you've learned about it, great. Maybe you can use some of that knowledge. But of course, eventually, you're going to need to make an argument about hunting, but you don't have to have all of that worked out yet. But you can start thinking about sort of questions or issues that might be connected to hunting. Even if they're not things that you have direct experience with, they're things that you've heard about, things that people are talking about. They're sort of larger issues related to your interest. And that can be a way to get tapped in to a larger ongoing debate. And that's what we eventually want to do. So several years ago, I had a student who really wanted to write about hunting, but it took him a long time to kind of find an argument. But what we eventually found, largely through research, is that there is kind of this ongoing debate about big game hunting, particularly in places like Africa, and often involving endangered animals or animals that are kind of prized for various reasons, and people feel a little bit weird maybe about the idea of them getting hunted and killed. So even though he had never been big game hunting, he had never been to Africa, his interest in hunting got him kind of connected to this larger debate, this larger issue that he was able to eventually make an argument about. So that's kind of what we can do here with our own interests, our own bodies of knowledge. We can eventually connect them to more academic type topics. I had another student, this is pretty common in Nevada, I had a student who was a big skier. She liked to ski. She thought a lot and read a lot about skiing. Her whole family skied. She knew a lot about it. Again, she had a lot of personal experience. It was a hobby. But we had to find a way to connect her personal experience and knowledge to something bigger, something academic that could eventually yield an argument. So she eventually got kind of interested in sports medicine and particularly how to prevent common skiing injuries. I can't remember exactly what the injuries were that we were trying to prevent, but that became her argument by the end of the semester. She had this whole sort of training regimen that she created based on her own knowledge, but also based on the research that she had done. And it was basically a way to kind of teach beginner skiers how to avoid some really common injuries to the sport. So that became her argument. This is what we need to do to cut back on injuries and to prepare sort of new skiers for the challenges that come along with this particular sport. So again, taking that interest, that personal knowledge, and connecting it to something bigger than yourself. That's often a very effective strategy. So we can start doing that now. Take anything that you wrote down during this initial brainstorming session and ask yourself, are people talking about this? Is there a larger debate going on about this? Is this being talked about in the news? Is this being talked about on social media? Have I heard anything about it on TV, or have I read anything about it online? And that can be a good clue as to whether or not this particular interest of yours might work in the future as a research topic. So start there and hopefully we can start making a little bit of progress. So, okay, you have some things that you have some things that you're interested in, things that you like, you have a personal connection to, and a lot of that stuff can maybe work out for you. Not all of it, not everything that you jotted down is going to lead you to a topic, but some of it might. And again, just remember that we need things that are being argued about. We need topics that will eventually take us to our own original argument. So I had a professor once who told us that when we're thinking about research topics, research papers, and making arguments, we have to think about it like we are going to a party. Okay? We arrive a little bit late at the party. And when we get there, a lot of the other people are already in conversations. People are sort of paired up or they're in groups and they're talking. They're having a series of different conversations. And because we just got there, we don't necessarily know what everybody is talking about. And that's what research is for. So once we get to the party, we start kind of listening, we're walking around, we're listening to what people are saying, and we're starting to get a larger understanding of these conversations. Okay? Oh, this person thinks A, but this other person thinks B. Okay? They're having a debate. Or over here, everybody's kind of pro blank, but on the other side of the room, they're anti that same thing. They're against it. These people are for it. These people are against it. So that's what research does for us. Research educates us. We learn about what people are saying, what people think, what people are doing, and we're learning more about these ongoing conversations, these ongoing debates. And that's what we're going to be doing over the next several weeks as we research. So just keep that in mind. Any topic that you choose, it needs to be the kind of thing that people are going to be talking about at this fictional party. It's the kind of thing that people can argue about. It's the kind of thing that, is out there in the world. It's being written on. It's being talked about. It's being discussed. It might be in the news, but it might be more localized, not on the national news, but maybe the local news. Maybe people are talking about it on social media. That's how you know that there's room for you to make an argument eventually. Not all topics lend themselves to really good arguments. So we need to pick topics that will allow us eventually to make good arguments. But again, you don't have to know what your argument is going to be yet. As you're wandering around this room at the party, you're just listening to people. You're learning. All right, you might not know exactly where you stand on all of these different debates, but you know where that guy stands, and you know where she stands, and you know what that side of the room is saying, and then you hear what the other side of the room is saying, and then later you'll be able to figure out your own position. So hopefully that helps. Okay, so the next thing you can do, once you have some good stuff jotted down, some potential areas of interest, some potential topics, you can do a little bit of free writing. So I put all of this into the week 4 module so you can go through and take a look. But a free write just means you write nonstop about a hobby, something that you know, whatever it is you're studying in school or what you do at work. Just write about that thing. Or you might choose a few that you just jotted down in the brainstorming session. Just write everything that you know about those items, about those things, about those potential topics. Write nonstop for about 10 to 15 minutes. Don't worry about spelling, grammar. Don't worry if it's going to make sense to anybody else. It is just for you. It's strictly for you. And just write nonstop and just get everything down on paper that you know about it. Everything that you remember about it. Everything that you think about it. A lot of that might never show up in any of your future work. But even if you come up with one good idea or one really strong opinion, that might be able to help you later. It's still productive. We're only spending 10 minutes or 15 minutes doing this. And over the course of that free write, you might land on some really good stuff. You might generate some really good content that you'll be able to use later. And if you don't, well, no big loss. You can just move on. And if you find yourself struggling to write a lot, if you take one of your hobbies and you say, okay, I'm going to free write everything I know, everything I think, everything I believe about this hobby, and you can only write for about 2 minutes, and then you you're out, you're exhausted, you don't have anything else, that's a pretty good indication that that particular hobby is probably not going to give you enough for what we're doing. But if you can write for a while, if you have a lot to say, if you're filling up your page and you can even go beyond the 10 or 15 minutes, then you know you're on to something. You know you have something with potential. Okay? And the other kind of easy pre-writing strategy, pre-writing, as you guys might remember from 101, just means everything you do before you're ready to start writing stuff. This is just the idea generation phase. Another popular pre-writing strategy is what's called clustering. And this is just a way to kind of come up with interconnected or related ideas. So start with something that you wrote down in your brainstorming session, a hobby, something you know about, something you study in school, and then put it in the middle of a page and put a little circle around it, okay? And then you're going to draw lines connecting that central topic to things that are related to it. Maybe other related fields or other related ideas, things that are similar to it, things that might be included within that topic, things that are important to that topic. And by kind of creating this network, this web of interconnected or interrelated ideas and concepts, you'll be able to really start generating some good content. So you might end up with a lot of things connected to that central topic, a lot of ideas, people, recent events, kind of component parts, things that go into that larger topic, and that's all material that you might be able to use later. So just spend some time free writing, clustering, and doing any other type of idea generation strategy that comes to mind. Sometimes you just might want to ask yourself some really basic questions. Jot down some answers, and those answers can also be a way to generate more ideas. So I've listed a few basic questions in the week 4 overview. You don't have to answer them all necessarily. You might just want to pick and choose, but all of these will help you to get more ideas down on paper. So think about any experiences that you've had recently that sort of raised interesting questions or just kind of created some associations in your mind. Again, drawing on personal experience can be a good thing because it gives you that personal stake, that direct interest in the topic that you're working with. So have you had any experiences at school, at work, at home, anything that you can draw on? Then think about stuff that you've observed. Think about stuff that you've read, stuff that you've heard people talking about. Again, if there's a lot of, if you're hearing or reading about a lot of hot button issues, and some of that stuff might grab your interest, right? Have you read anything online? Have you seen anything on TV? Have you heard friends or family talking about certain issues or certain problems that you might like to pursue? That's always a good thing to consider. And finally, this is maybe one of the best questions to answer. Is there a problem that you want to solve? Again, this can be a local problem that sort of affects your community or your neighborhood, your high school GBC, or maybe the entire state? Is there a problem facing Nevada? Or if you live in a different state, is there a problem facing the state where you are, the city you live in? You can also think about national problems, things that are confronting the U.S., issues that we have to solve in the U.S. Or you can think about global problems, problems that affect everyone on Earth. Like I said earlier, you'll have to eventually get a little more specific. But at this stage, as we're just generating ideas, you can definitely talk about national problems or think about national problems, global problems, local problems, problems affecting you at work, problems affecting you at school, maybe even problems that are facing your family or people that you know. We obviously want to avoid strictly personal things, like if, you have some friends going through relationship problems or whatever, that's not going to make a good topic. But if your family is facing larger issues, or if you yourself have been affected by things pertaining to the economy or things pertaining to the education system or the immigration system in this country, you can pursue those problems. And you might end up offering solutions or making arguments that tell us how we should solve some of those problems. So again, with research topics, tackling problems, big issues, that's always a good way to go, because that gives you a pretty clear goal. You're trying to solve the problem. Your argument will eventually be, hey, this is how we fix the problem. So that can be a good route to take. All right, and for those of us who can use the internet and can get started using the internet a little bit this week, there's some basic strategies you can use just to get a little bit more familiar with your topic. So like I said, or your potential topic. I mean, hopefully by the end of the week, we have selected topics, because next week, like I said, we're going to start our official research. So that means using the library databases. That means I'll be walking you through some things. But in the meantime, you can just use Google. And just start doing some basic reading. Type in your topic. Type in what you're thinking about into Google and just see what comes up. Do a basic keyword search. And at this point, you can just kind of look around, do some reading, educate yourself a little bit. I always tell students at this early stage of research, we can use Wikipedia. All right, Wikipedia is not going to be one of our sources when we're doing real research, but it can be a way to get started. It's just a way to learn more about whatever it is you're interested in. A lot of big issues, a lot of big potential research topics will have Wikipedia pages about them. So global warming, that has a pretty good Wikipedia page. You're not going to use everything that you see there. You might not end up using much of it at all. But it's just a way to learn. It's just a way to gather a little bit of info and broaden your perspective. So Wikipedia is not a reliable source for our real research because it's an open source site. Anybody can post information to Wikipedia. There's not always a good way of knowing what's true and what's not. But one thing you guys will notice, if you're looking at a good Wikipedia page made by a professional who works in the field, or maybe just somebody who knows a lot about it, you're going to notice references. You're going to notice at the bottom of that page basically like a works cited page, where the author of that page is including all of the sources that he or she used to create that page. And that's a good sign that the page is pretty reliable. And another thing that you can do, if you see references, if you see that work cited at the bottom, you're also going to frequently see links to those original sources. Links that will take you to websites or will, take you even maybe to a PDF, and you can read some of the original sources that the author of that Wikipedia page used to make the Wikipedia page. That is how to use Wikipedia effectively as a student. We're not just going to take everything that we read there and recycle it. Instead, we're going to find the sources that were used to create the page. If the page is good and we have a list of sources, let's go and find some of those sources. We might not have access to all of them, but we can follow some of those links, some of those URLs, and we'll be able to find some good websites, some good books and articles that we might be able to use ourselves as we move along. So just acquaint yourself a little bit more with your topic. Again, we can always draw on personal experience and the knowledge that we already have, but let's also use the other resources at our fingertips. A quick Google search, talk to coworkers, talk to family, talk to other people who might have some knowledge or some experience of their own. Just start educating yourself. It's never too early to do that. And then finally, sort of our big goal for the end of the week. Obviously, we want to have topics selected. And then we also need to have research questions written down, ready to go, so we're ready for the start of next week. So research questions are basically just things that you want to know about your topic, things that you're not quite sure about yet, but you're hoping to find answers to these questions through research. So we can take really broad topics, right? Or just things that we know about, things that we're interested in, and we can start asking questions about them. So again, I've seen this many times over the years. I've had in the past, and still a little bit today, I've had a lot of students who were veterans, who were coming back from Iraq or Afghanistan. So a lot of them wanted to write about the U.S. military or something related to the U.S. military. So that's kind of what they started with. And then they were able to come up with some good research questions about the military. Like, how can we best assist veterans in their transition back to civilian life? That could be a very interesting question. And we can start looking for potential answers to that question through research. Do we need more sort of government-funded programs? Does the VA need to do more? Do we need more workplace training to get them ready for the sort of new world, the new economy, the new types of jobs that they might need to try to find, right? I mean, what can we do? How can we help them? Is it best for them to go to college? Is it best for them to just get straight into the workforce? What do they need to do? So you don't have to have the answers. You can start looking for the answers once you start researching. Or if one of your things that you're interested in, going back to education, if you're just interested in, early childhood education, but you don't really know what you want to say about it yet, that's fine. Start with some basic research questions like, how do we measure student success at whatever grade level, you're interested in, like an elementary school or whatever? How do we measure student success? And is that system working? Like, is that the most efficient, the most effective system to evaluate student learning and the gains that they're making? You don't have to have an answer. You might not really know the answer yet, but you can start looking for answers to those types of questions through research. Again, if you're interested in hunting, what is ethical hunting versus non-ethical hunting? What are people saying about it? What are some laws out there that might be connected to the differences, that the different types of hunting or hunting that might be deemed as acceptable and sort of morally fine versus the kinds that maybe we don't like, or the kinds that are more destructive and just based on, vanity or whatever, not doing it for more practical reasons. So again, you can look for answers to those kinds of questions. So virtually any potential topic will have a lot of questions that you can ask about them. And then when we start researching, we'll be able to look for answers to those questions. So it's just good to have several research questions written down, because obviously you can just start your research by looking for stuff about your topic, like the simple keyword search in Google. You can just type in your topic and see what pops up. That's a good way to start. But it's also good to get a little bit more focused and specific. So that's why we need to have research questions, so we can get more specific with our searches. We can start searching for more specific information. We can do several searches. We don't just have to punch in global warming or education or military. We can get more specific. We can start looking for certain areas or certain aspects of that larger topic. So once you pick your topic, write down some research questions that you want to answer next week when we begin our research. Okay? And then the final thing, and just a final thought on research questions. Sometimes if you arrive at an answer to that research question through research, through your own ideas, but also what you learn, what you read, eventually your answer to the research question might become your thesis in the research paper. So if you arrive at an answer for how to best assist veterans coming back from foreign wars, or just people getting out of the service, I guess we're not currently at war anymore, but just people getting out of the service and sort of reintegrating into normal civilian life, if you arrive at an answer based on what you've read, what you've researched, then that answer, that's your solution to the problem that you're addressing, and that might eventually be your argument, your thesis, and you can build your whole paper around it. So research questions do not just help us right now. They're going to help us, hopefully, throughout the rest of the semester. Those answers that we find will later be important content for us, one way or another. Okay, the final thing I'll mention here before we sign off is your next research journal. Okay, so the week 4 research journal is asking you to build what I call a knowledge inventory. So you have to have a topic in mind before you can do this assignment. So basically, I'm asking you guys to write 2 paragraphs. The first paragraph is all about what you already know about your topic. So again, go back to your brainstorming and your free writing that I've been talking about here today, and grab the stuff that you already know, the stuff that you've already experienced, and you can put that in the first paragraph. What you already know, what you already think, what you already believe about this topic. And then the second paragraph is going to be what you don't know, what you want to know or need to know, but don't know yet. So this is a great place to put some research questions, okay? This is the stuff that you need to learn through research. So in some cases, you can phrase them as questions that you're looking for the answers for. But you can also just say, all right, I need to know more about this particular aspect. I need to know more about the training, how people enter the field if you're looking at like a profession, right? Or I need to know more about the background, the history of this particular issue. I need to know more about how it started, some of the key players, and again, you can read about that on your own or beginning next week when we start research. But just start jotting down the stuff that you need to know, that you would like to know, but don't know yet. And again, that's going to give you a really nice guide that will help structure your research. That will give you specific things to look for, specific things to learn, and that will ensure that your research is productive. Okay? So, tackle all of that stuff, and next week we're going to get moving on our official research. So I'm going to walk you guys through some basic strategies, get you acquainted with the library website, and I'm also going to make sure that we're all able to log in to the library website. So we'll get into all of that next week. In the meantime, pick your topics and put some real thought into it. Again, don't just pick something at random, because remember, you're stuck with these topics for the entire semester. So choose wisely, go through the exercises that I've put in the week 4 overview, and let me know if you have any questions. I'll see you next week.